I'm Margo Stahl. I'm the refuge manager at the Hobe Sound National Wildlife Refuge in Florida. I've been the manager there for 9 years. I'm very proud to say it has come a long way in those 9 years. We had a series of hurricanes that basically destroyed all of our facilities, and so I was able to help oversee the reconstruction of new headquarters buildings, new quarters, new boardwalks, new boat ramp, etc. So I'm very proud to be there. But at the same time, I'm very concerned about its long-term prognosis in light of the climate change scenarios that we anticipate. Our refuge is famous and well known for its sea turtle nesting. We have some of the most productive sea turtle nesting in the entire world, actually. We're the center for loggerhead nesting, loggerhead sea turtle nesting in the region. So with the proposed or anticipated sea level rise, our turtles are going to have more and more difficulty finding suitable habitat, so I'm very concerned. And I started my concern back in 1988 when I was at the University of Hawaii. I came from spending 26 years in Hawaii before I returned to Florida, where I was born. And during those 26 years, I went back to the University of Hawaii to take some classes and to update my knowledge in the field. And while I was in one of the classes, I started looking at the recently released IPCC report, which had just come out. And with great alarm, I was reading about the concern for the loss of sea ice and the potential collapse of ice sheets in Antarctica, and the potential for extreme temperature increases. And even though the IPCC was extremely conservative and they use only published literature, their scenarios and their concerns were quite alarming to me. And I could not understand why this wasn't making more news. For the University of Hawaii Coastal Zone Program, and they were rather oblivious to this issue of sea level rise, and they're the Coastal Zone Management Agency. I was working for the State Department of Land and Natural Resources in Hawaii, and they were involved with the fisheries management plan that I was working on, and they were oblivious to the potential impacts of climate change on our fisheries resources. And with the Army Corps of Engineers, our coastal programs, our projects, our boat ramps, a variety of civil works projects that involved harbors and boat launches, and water control structures, and the Kauai Nui Marsh Management plan that I worked on, the EIS, for that civil works project. I included in the draft concerns about sea level rise and how the proposed alternative for addressing flood control in that area might have to be considered in light of the sea level rise that we would see over the life of the project. And it took several of my managers by surprise, and they asked me to delete that because that was at the time not a concern or on the horizon at that point. So several agencies were not reading the IPCC report the way I was, and it wasn't yet part of the lens that we now are looking at. It's about 7, 8 years ago, I recall feeling optimistic again about it. And that lasted for a while. And in fact, the Fish and Wildlife Service was finally up on board and said, okay, now we have to incorporate climate change language into our reports that we're putting out, our CCPs, our conservation plans and habitat management plans and recovery plans for our endangered and threatened species. So, but once again, a few little difficulties allowed the naysayer movement to take advantage and to create doubt again in the public mind. Suddenly, the latest polls are now dropping that concern for the environment way down, and the concern is now for the economy, and they're not realizing that they are one and the same. We need to be better armed and coached, and we we owe these resources that are under our care right now as part of our mission for the continuing benefit of the American people. What is our responsibility and duty to change this tide and get the public to understand they have to work with us. Florida is really on the front line of climate. We're starting to see species much further north than historically seen. We see nesting of various birds much farther north than historically seen. We've seen the movement of manatees much further north than historically seen. We see snook being caught in northern climes that were not normally seen. So we're beginning to see a picture building up that maybe is certainly consistent with what we expect climate change to be happening. You know, if you have offspring, children, and you believe this scenario, which I do, and I did and I do, you begin to wonder, you know, if you don't do anything, if you don't make an effort, what is that saying for your offspring? And how will they view you? How will future generations view their parents and their grandparents if they did nothing? And I've often thought, well, we need to make sure the naysayers get their names published clearly and evidently, so that their children will know that they did not work toward making this a better planet for them. And those of us who are concerned and do read the science data and do understand it and believe it will work towards helping save the worst of scenarios against the worst scenarios. You know, even if we stop all of our carbon emissions today, we will see temperature increase. But if we can possibly work as hard as we can to bring those emissions into a more stable equilibrium, we can reduce the worst scenarios from taking place. And that's what I would like us to do. And that's what I strive to do in my work. And that's what I would recommend we all try to do. And I'll feel better about passing on you know, the work to my daughter and her children when she has her children. So it's very personal.